Yeah, guys, it's your boy Mikey. Today we're talking about ley lines, which are Earth's energy grid itself, and there's a lot of conspiracy behind it. And mainstream science considers this like a pseudoscience. There is no energy grid surrounding Earth, but you can clearly see that Earth's ancient monuments and pyramids are uh, intentionally placed in within this grid system of energy system of the Earth known as ley lines. And let's just get into it. What actually it is, and what was this ley lines, and what was it used for in ancient times, and I truly believe there was an advanced civilization who's taking advantage of these ley lines.
Ever wondered how some places on Earth, like the pyramids of Egypt or Mount Shasta, seem to have more energy than others? Did you ever wonder why certain ancient sites are located where they are? These questions lead us to the captivating concept of ley lines, a groundbreaking theory initially introduced by Alfred Watkins. Watkins, a versatile Englishman, came upon this theory in the early 20th century. He discovered that numerous ancient sites, ranging from antiquated churches to magical stone circles, appeared to align with each other over extensive distances. These alignments were not haphazardly sprinkled across the landscape, but were deliberate placements, drawing unseen connective lines around Earth.
Yeah, everything's intentionally placed. It's a antiquity may be considered as like an energy grid system that you know that derives energy from thin air, like ethereal energy uh uh, from Earth's energy grid itself, and there is a natural source of energy, like something we're not even being told.
Spellbound, he delved further into his observations, and in the year 1921, he coined the term ley lines to denote these compelling energy lines. Watkins' theory ignited an international curiosity that provided a fresh perspective of our planet and its ancient civilizations. Alfred Watkins gave birth to the theory, but what exactly constitutes these enigmatic ley lines? Consider the native people of the United States. They used to refer to ley lines as spirit lines, and their shamans would use the electromagnetic energy in these lines to communicate with the spirits. They even based their medicine wheel on the spirit lines since they understood they followed a straight round path. The Druids termed them mystical lines. In Europe, the Welsh used the same name as the Eastern countries. They called them dragon lines. We know that dragon lines were named by Eastern countries because the sky gods flew on dragons along these lines. The Aborigines of Australia referred to these lines as dream lines, and they claim that knowledge was sent down to them from the gods of the sky as well. Picture a global grid, a web that spans the entire Earth. According to Alfred Watkins, ley lines are just that. They're hypothetical lines that connect ancient sites, forming a mysterious network across our planet. These lines, however, are not what you'd see on a typical map. They're invisible to the naked eye, adding a layer of intrigue and mystique. Think of them as highways of energy flowing from one ancient site to another, creating a connection that's as profound as it is elusive. They're not just geographical or historical markers. They're conduits, channels of energy that link the
It is some kind of energy grid that uses Earth's energy itself. Not like in a sense, we harvest electricity. No, it's something kind of like a deeper sense of ethereal energy.
these ancient sites together, imbuing them with a sense of power and unity. These unseen pathways of energy are said to crisscross the globe, but where exactly can we find them? The answer is as intriguing as the mystery itself. Researchers have essentially played the role of cosmic detectives, piecing together an invisible puzzle. They've mapped these mystical lines based on the locations of ancient sites, as if connecting the dots on a celestial canvas. Take, for example, the ley lines at the pyramids of Egypt or those that intersect at Stonehenge. How did these ancient people know of their existence? Were they really in communication with the gods? It's a question that has puzzled historians and researchers alike. Some propose that these ancient civilizations were just more in tune with the Earth's energies, while others suggest they had a sophisticated understanding of geometry and astronomy. These ancient sites are no random placements. They
I would believe in the latter, like they have sophisticated understanding of technology, understanding of the energy grid of the Earth itself, and for and using this energy grid to to build you know higher advanced civilization, something we're not being told in the mainstream history.
tap into the ley line's power. But what do they do exactly? Well, that's a question we'll delve into as we continue our exploration of these fascinating invisible threads that weave our world together. So we've tracked these ley lines across the globe, but what's the point? What do they do? Get ready to explore the practical application of ley lines in the architecture of ancient civilizations. Many believe that the ancient Egyptians were in tune with these invisible energy highways and applied this knowledge in their architectural marvels. Imagine the Great Pyramid of Giza, an astonishing feat of ancient engineering, positioned precisely along these lines to conduct energy. Now, travel to another iconic site, Stonehenge. The ancient stone circle inn is said to be situated on a powerful...
Yeah, Stonehenge, the Pyramid of Giza, like every ancient monuments is placed on intersections of these ley lines. We clearly see there's some kind of like a sophisticated grid pattern, maybe before the flood itself, the diluvian, the deluge itself shows human beings have some kind of advanced technology, and it's also associated with something spiritual, like, and also some esoteric mysteries regarding ley lines as like light veins or mystery lines, spiritual lines. Like, it's crazy.
intersection of ley lines, marking it as a place of significant energy, spiritual importance, and astrology. It is said to also have been used as a calendar to mark huge events in time. The mysterious nature of the ley lines and their influence on these ancient architectural wonders, they say, is not to be underestimated. This fascination dates back millennia. Our ancestors were keenly aware of these energy lines, using them to guide their monumental construction projects by either intuition or guidance. It seems ley lines were not just a 21st century fascination, but a well-kept secret of the ancient world. Were the locations of mountains like Mount Shasta merely a work of natural formation, or was there an ancient understanding in play?
It's also a well-kept secret of today's world itself.
The mystery of these towering natural landmarks is deeply intertwined with the theory of ley lines. Many theorists propose that these invisible pathways of energy influenced where nature placed its paramount beauties, the mountains. Picture this, a world untouched by the modernity of Google Maps, yet these massive peaks are precisely positioned. Could it be that their locations were influenced by the unseen energy of our Earth? And Mount Shasta is not the only one. Consider Mount Fuji, Mount Olympus, Notre Dame, Solomon's Temple, Parthenon, Oracle of Delphi, the Vatican, DC Capitol, Mecca, Aztec pyramids, Bermuda Triangle, Tesla's lab, nuclear power plants, military bases, and stadiums, all on ley lines using Earth's energy like giant batteries. All these majestic beauties of land and nature, thousands of miles apart, yet all humming on the same frequency of Earth's magnetic field. A mere coincidence or an ancient knowledge lost in the sands of time? As we traverse from the
It's 100% ancient knowledge. It's some kind of it's not even a coincidence. It's not even a question of conspiracy. It's 100% real. There's some kind of like a free energy kind of stuff actually going on.
snow-capped peaks of the Himalayas to the lush green heights of Mount Kilimanjaro, the ley lines have been a source of fascination and mystery. Who knows what other secrets the positioning of these mountains along these lines hold? From the ancient structures of Stonehenge to the towering peaks of Mount Shasta, we've journeyed across the globe, tracing the invisible threads of energy that bind our world together. And as we
Also, one thing like the universe itself corresponds to actually, our own human body. Like our human body consists of fingerprints, a lot of lines, markings on our hands. Our human body also corresponds to the Earth itself. So you can draw a conclusion that this energy grid system are intentionally placed, to harvest some kind of free energy from the Earth itself.
Studying a map when he realizes these energy lines he's been discovering connect and follow to ancient sites around the world. His findings lead us to the mysteries of Earth's energy via the concept of ley lines, where ancient secrets meet modern science. Is there really energy all around you, even below your feet? Decode the mysteries shrouding these ancient energy pathways that traverse the globe. Watkins, a British photographer and amateur archaeologist, proposed the idea of these energy lines in the early 1920s. He observed that numerous ancient sites like the
And Nikola Tesla also made a conclusive evidence that the pyramids are placed in intentional grid lines or ley lines itself, and they have there's some kind of intentional purposes why the pyramids are built, and they're used to harness some kind of free energy. That was Tesla's conclusion, and Tesla wrote a lot of works on this. You can check it out about his understanding of the pyramids, why pyramids are placed in perfect position, not just in ley lines. It's not just in the section of ley lines itself, but also like pyramids are built in a way like you can the tip points to the North Star Polaris itself.
recognized Stonehenge contained lines hidden underneath the ground, creating passageways that cut through the landscape. Ever since, the theory has expanded to the belief in magical energy highways connecting global marvels. Some accounts state that the most well-known ley lines pass through ancient and secret locations. From Stonehenge in England to the Great Pyramids of Egypt, the stunning heights of Machu Picchu in Peru, and ancient temples throughout Bali and Asia, they weave together like an ethereal tapestry. Notably, the ley line connecting the route from Stonehenge to the Great Pyramid passes through several noteworthy locations. One of them is Lake Titicaca, located high in the Andes between Bolivia and Peru and considered the Incas' birthplace. The ley line extends north to Tenochtitlan, or Mexico City, the Aztec civilization's ancient capital. It's interesting to think about if these ancient cultures were aware of these energy lines and purposefully built their cities and monuments
That's
along
like an extensive study of ley lines, also known as geomancy. Like you can actually check into that.
them. In England, other notable locations along ley lines include Avebury, a Neolithic henge monument containing 3 stone circles, and the ancient site of Glastonbury Tor with its medieval tower. Both of these sites
100% of these things were placed intentionally over here to harness energy, and
are enveloped in mystery and local legends, adding further intrigue to this invisible lattice of energy. Some even suggest that these lines may affect everything from human awareness to bird migration. A hidden network of energy lines spanning the entire planet is an intriguing idea for people with mystical beliefs, even though skeptics could write it off as chance or our human tendency to see patterns. Could our ancestors, the architects of these breathtaking locations, kept a long-lost secret? Picture a world where hidden bonds link the ancient wonders and hold the keys to Earth's puzzles. Join us as we delve into the mystery of ley lines, exploring these unseen connections that may just link us all together. Many different cultures worldwide have their own unique interpretations of these enigmatic parallel lines. From each continent and throughout millennia, ley lines have piqued curiosity and awareness. They have been viewed through a variety of cultural lenses, each of which has contributed its own interpretation and importance. Let's embark on a global journey to comprehend the diverse cultural viewpoints on ley lines. We begin in Australia, the land down under, where we learn about the Aboriginal people and their belief in songlines, their version of ley lines. These are pathways that cut through the land or the sky, following the course that the local...
Isn't it crazy? Like every mythology actually talks about the same thing. Like every mythology has the same interpretation of ley lines. There's some kind of like a spiritual essence to it. It's crazy.
creator beings took. The Aboriginals sing these roots, each song depicting a unique landscape, thus creating a complex auditory map of their environment. We then take flight to ancient China, where ley lines are known as dragon paths. These were seen by the Chinese as Mother Earth's vitality channels, shaping everything from architectural designs to burial grounds. Feng Shui, the age-old art of aligning with the surrounding environment, was fundamentally based on comprehending these dragon paths. Our voyage then takes us to the vibrant green terrains of Celtic lands, where ley lines are depicted as fairy paths. These pathways were believed to be unseen routes traversed by fairies and spirits, and they held a sacred importance in Celtic mythology. It was considered an ill fate to construct anything that blocked these paths, a belief that still prevails in some countryside areas of Ireland. Across the pond, we learn about ley lines in the United Kingdom, known as Old Straight Tracks. These were ancient lines marked by the placement of megalithic structures, hilltops, and other geographical markers. They were believed to be paths of spiritual energy that connected important landmarks. In fact, many sacred sites, like the Stonehenge and the Rollright stones, are thought to be connected through these ley lines. These interpretations, while varying in their specifics, share a universal belief in an invisible network of energy lines crisscrossing the planet. These lines, whether perceived as song lines, dragon paths, fairy paths, or old straight tracks, are believed to link significant landmarks, forging patterns and roots of spiritual, historical, and geographical significance. From every corner of the world, these lines have whispered their tales, entwining us in a shared web of mysticism. Next, we'll explore the intriguing connection between these ley lines and revolutionary physicist Nikola Tesla. Was famed inventor Nikola Tesla aware of the unique alignments of the Egyptian pyramids and their connection to ley lines? Tesla's fascination with the pyramids, renowned for their precision and alignment with celestial bodies, suggests a potential association with these unseen pathways that link ancient sites worldwide. Could Tesla's admiration for the pyramids have been influenced by their location on powerful ley lines? Although there's no substantial evidence, Tesla seemed to either know or perhaps learned of this knowledge through a contact or ancient text. Following this intriguing theory, we delve into Tesla's work in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and Wardenclyffe, New York. Both these places, noteworthy for Tesla's revolutionary experiments, sit on ley lines. In Colorado Springs, Tesla focused his efforts on deciphering and manipulating electricity, the setting for his iconic laboratory. This location is positioned directly over a significant ley line. The story at Wardenclyffe, New York is familiar. This is the site where Tesla started his bold ambition to build a wireless transmission tower, which, however, never got fulfilled. Yet, just like Colorado Springs, Wardenclyffe is located on a ley line, further reinforcing a potential connection between Tesla and these connecting geographical alignments. This brings us to question, was Tesla's choice of these sites a mere coincidence, or had he more time been able to plug into these ley line connections how he intended? The mystery remains unsolved, but the questions themselves fuel our curiosity and magnify our respect for Tesla's genius. It's intriguing to consider how Tesla, to human innovation, may have been more intertwined with these mystic lines than we could have ever
The travesty and injustice done to Nikola Tesla will never be forgotten. Like what that man could have achieved for mankind itself, But we'll never know because all this information has been, all his patents have been stolen. It's crazy.
imagined back then. As we venture further in our quest to decipher the elusive ley lines, our path intertwines with two influential figures, Tony Wedd and Paul Devereaux. In 1961, Wedd published a book called Skyways and Landmarks, stating that Watkins leys were both authentic and functioned as markers to direct extraterrestrial spaceships that were coming to Earth. Upon contrasting Watkins' theories with those of French ufologist Aimé Michel, who contended that orthotenies are lines that extraterrestrial spacecraft might have traveled, Wedd proposed that either the spacecraft were tracking ancient landmarks or they were tracking a magnetic current that was traversing the Earth. Adding to this, a ley line hunting club was created in 1962. Many ley line hunters utilize esoteric practices like dowsing and numerology to detect these mystical paths. The dowsing method, beyond locating water and gems, is believed to tap into the Earth's energy and reveal magnetic current. On the other side of this chapter, we have Devereaux, a highly esteemed researcher and author renowned for his work in archaeology, anthropology, and research on consciousness. Devereaux has brought new insights into the knowledge of ley lines with his distinctive blend of scientific and spiritual viewpoints. He proposes that these lines may have functioned as paths for our ancestors' ceremonial or ritualistic purposes as well. His fascination with the unanswered mysteries of Earth motivated him to delve into the world of ley lines, where his contributions and daring theories are significant. Devereaux pioneered the Dragon Project in 1977, an initiative aimed at unraveling the mysteries of ancient sites and their possible connection to ley lines, leveraging a blend of scientific techniques and intuitive methods. The Dragon Project was dedicated to exploring the correlation between ancient sites, ley lines, and their potential impact on human psychology and consciousness. Their relentless exploration and collective expertise have brought us a step closer to demystifying the nature of these ancient lines. As we dive deeper into Scene 4, we accompany thoughts that lead us into journeys into the mystical. Many UFOs and alien sightings are reported on ley lines. Could these lines be highways or markers for extraterrestrial visitors? This tantalizing question marks the beginning of our journey into the connection between ley lines and unidentified flying objects, or UFOs. Let's dive into the theory that UFOs may use ley lines as navigational aids. Imagine this. You're an alien visitor, zipping around in the vast cosmic ocean. How do you
Am I the only one who believes that UFOs and aliens are stupid? Like, anybody who believes that UFOs and aliens are just basically retarded, like, every UFO is like a militaristic technology or some kind of ancient technology. There's no such thing as extraterrestrial visitors from outer space.
find your way to the exact location you want to visit? You could use stars and other celestial bodies, but what if there's a simpler Earth-centric method? What if you could use the magnetic energy lines of the Earth itself, a cosmic GPS? This is where ley lines come in. Some proponents of this theory suggest that UFOs, much like the ancient mariners of Earth, navigate using these invisible lines. These energy lines crisscross the globe, connecting ancient sites and natural wonders. They work helping guide extraterrestrial visitors to their destinations. Now let's shift our gaze to the ancient ones and their understanding of these lines. There's a belief that ancient civilizations, from the Egyptians to the Mayans, were aware of these energy lines and marked them with stones and monuments. These markers served as signposts, not just for their own people, but also for visitors from the stars. Think about it. The pyramids of Giza, Stonehenge, Machu Picchu, all sitting on ley lines and all, coincidentally or not, associated with UFO sightings. Could it be that our ancestors were not just advanced architects, but also cosmic traffic controllers, guiding UFOs to safe landing zones using the energy lines and their markers? As we delve deeper into the mysteries of ley lines, we find ourselves standing at the intersection of science, history, and the paranormal. The lines on the map lead us to new questions, new theories, and perhaps new truths. From the
The
depths
reason why those things contradict each other is because mainstream science is not telling the truth about the world or what actually the world actually is.
of the Earth to the farthest reaches of the cosmos, ley lines might be part of something bigger bridging our worlds. And who knows, perhaps we're not as alone as we think. Traditional shamans also played a part in ley lines working in the countryside. Shamans discovered that some locations had more intrinsic power than others, both generally and for particular tasks like healing or communicating with other dimensions of reality. These energies were especially strong because of the locations where the ley lines started and traveled through. To prevent becoming overwhelmed, shamans who tapped into them needed to be conscious of both their conscious and shadow identities. Skeptics question their existence, arguing that the alignments of ancient sites are merely coincidental. Proponents, however, see a purposeful design in these alignments, suggesting they may be part of a worldwide energy grid. This theory proposes that the Earth itself is crisscrossed by lines of magnetic force, with ancient sites acting as conduits for this energy. But the magic of ley lines extends beyond mere geography or physics.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like ancient sites, especially what's under. There's a lot of speculation what's under the pyramids. It consists of large coils. These are 100% conduits for harnessing free energy like throughout the entire world. It's 100% that's the case.
Steeped in spiritual significance. Many believe that these invisible pathways carry a powerful energy that can influence one's consciousness. Some even go as far as to suggest that ley lines serve as spiritual highways, guiding the journey of souls between the physical and astral planes. In many cultures, these lines are revered and treated with great respect. They're seen as sacred paths with ceremonies and rituals often performed at their intersections. These practices, rooted in ancient traditions, add a layer of mysticism to the scientific debate. And then there's the enchanting allure of the unknown. Despite all the research and exploration, the true nature of ley lines remains elusive. Are they mere figments of our collective imagination? What part will they play in our future? Could we learn to tap into its energy and harness power from a more natural source? Do we already use its energy in modern technology? As we grapple with these questions, the enigma of ley lines only deepens. They continue to captivate our curiosity, drawing us into a web of mystery and intrigue. For some people, perhaps it's this unending quest for answers, this yearning to unravel the unknown, that truly encapsulates the magic of ley.
Yeah, it's 100% intentionally hidden by the rulers of the world, the elites who actually control this world. They don't want this information going out. It's crazy.
Circular earthwork or clump of trees planted on these high points and in low points in the valley. In 1921, an unassuming businessman named Alfred Watkins was driving down a rural country road in Blackwardine, England, when in a moment of epiphany, he was suddenly struck, quote, like a flash. Having stopped at a nearby archaeological site, overlooking the sprawling countryside, he perceived something spectacular. To share in his vision, he asks us to, quote, imagine a fairy chain stretched from mountain peak to mountain peak, as far as the eye could reach, and paid out until it touched the high places of the earth, at a number of ridges, banks, and knolls. Then visualize a mound, circular earthwork, or clump of trees planted on these high points, and in low points in the valley, other mounds ringed round with water to be seen from a distance. Then great standing stones brought to mark the way at intervals, and on a bank leading up to a mountain ridge or down to a ford, the track cut deep, so as to form a guiding notch on the skyline. Here and there at two ends of the way, a beacon fire used to lay out the track. All these works exactly on the sighting line. Author John Michel writes of the experience, quote, Watkins saw straight through the surface of the landscape, to a layer deposited in some remote prehistoric age. The barrier of time melted, and spread across the country. He saw a web of lines, linking the holy places and sites of antiquity. In one moment of transcendent perception, Watkins entered the magic world of prehistoric Britain. Like the ancients in their visionary states, sacred space would once again reveal itself through the soul of man, this time revealing a deeper secret, illuminating a vast network of mysterious power spread to all corners of the land, linking together humanity, the earth, and the cosmos, the knowledge of which was once known and glorified through the great architecture of antiquity, but had long been forgotten. Watkins was then set on his own path of discovery, leading to his seminal book, The Old Straight Track. He found that sites along certain lines had the same word used
Yeah, and now Watkins' theory is considered as pseudoscience or conspiracy at this point. Like,
in their name, one of these being the word ley, an Old Saxon term meaning cleared
because mainstream wanted us to believe that you had to pay for electricity.
strip of land. He chose this word to describe these straight alignments, due to his observation of what appeared to have once been straight trackways that led between the ancient sites of Britain. His work would go on to spark much curiosity and debate among academics and the general public alike. Countless theories would arise regarding ley lines, from the outright denial of their existence to fringe speculations of energy grids that enveloped the Earth. Being a conservative man, Watkins proposed a more prosaic function, that these alignments were simply markers for old trade routes. He and his contemporaries plotted numerous leys all over Britain, which he defined as straight alignments of at least 5 sites in succession. These could be any combination of megalithic structures, churches, holy wells, legendary trees, and natural formations. Since his initial discoveries, researchers have expanded the scope of his investigation, suggesting that ley lines existed all over the world. Watkins' theory, while initially sparking much curiosity and enthusiastic parties of ley hunters traipsing about the countryside, was roundly rejected by academia, and even among his own colleagues, skepticism grew as it became evident that many of these routes were not chosen for practical travel purposes, seeming to deliberately lead through more difficult terrain. Moreover, the level of sophistication required to achieve this was well beyond the current notions of what prehistoric people were capable of, and so interest in Watkins' work fell by the wayside. Until in the 1950s, it made a resurgence, this time due to the burgeoning field of UFO research. A French ufologist, Michel, upon plotting these locations of scores of UFO sightings on a map, noticed that they formed a series of straight lines. Around the same time, one of the earliest alleged alien abductees, a man named Buck Nelson, claimed that these entities were using these lines of magnetic force to somehow power their craft. Finally, ex-RAF pilot and UFO researcher Tony Wedd brought ley lines into the fold as part of a unified theory, that a vast network of energy spanned throughout the Earth. The idea began to emerge that somehow our ancestors knew of its existence, delineating its course and even...
Yeah, it just shows that they had flying cars before in our civilization, before, like flying cars, anti-gravity technology, and they uses ley lines to navigate these kinds of technology. They had this shit. They had flying cars before, bro. Like, so crazy. Like, the kind of anti-gravity is basically anti-electromagnetic technology. It's basically everything is basically electromagnetics. That we had this technology way before. Like, it's crazy.
somehow tapping into its power.
Reason why you don't have flying cars in today's civilizations is because it's intentionally hidden from you, because they don't want you to find about, free energy, free electromagnetic energy from around the world. Flying cars, magnetic cars that you can actually travel by using the navigation of the Leylines itself. It's crazy the amount of things that actually happen in antiquity, and we're not the most advanced civilization. We can conclusively say that.
Various potential configurations of this energy network would be proposed, and furthermore that the intersections of these lines created vortexes or hubs of amplified force. Significant mound sites and stones were found to often be situated at the intersections of major lines. The idea of an energy grid rose to prominence with the 60s counterculture and dovetailed with the emerging Gaia philosophical movement, which developed a more holistic vision of Earth. It is this system with which we will concern ourselves in expanding our view of sacred space. So grab your walking stick and join me.
It's also like a conspiracy that intersections of the Leylines are also used as stargates or like you know, uh, not just portals, teleportation is used for teleportation. Like you can actually travel from one intersection to another, and there's a lot of like esoteric conspiracy behind that. You can actually look into that.
wherever you are.
Just look into Stargates, bro. Like it'll blow your mind.
For in the words of Bilbo Baggins, there is only one road, and it is like a great river. It springs at every doorstep, and every path its tributary. Welcome to the Hidden Passage. References to a world network of creational force can be found in some of the oldest myths. The Hopi speak of a being called Grandmother Spider, who sent her webs of energy to a crystal which lay at the center of the earth, reflecting off of it and radiating out in all directions to create the spots of the fawn, the power centers of the world. Going back to where our journey began in the Aboriginal Dreamtime, similar to what Watkins had described, the Australian Aborigines also conceived of a network of ancient trackways. Only here we find a more mystical interpretation. These were the routes of the ancestral beings as they journeyed throughout the land in their cosmogenic adventures, imbued with their divine essence. Each tribe held a piece of the greater whole, and travel outside of one's own territory was done along these established paths. They are known to them as songlines, as the maps for these trails were written into their music. This idea is helpful for us in conceptually linking these ancient trackways with this energy system. These were not merely for physical travel, but facilitated access to and transfer of spiritual power and knowledge, and through them, fertilizing energies were circulated through the land. Jean Michel asserts that the awareness of these energy channels was once widely held by ancient peoples and acknowledged through similar ritual pathway traditions all over the world, even going so far as to suggest that it may have been a part of a global initiative, which employed the principles of a sacred science for some mysterious purpose that is difficult for us today to understand. He writes, quote, "A great science..."
It's not just for some mysterious purposes because it's intentionally hidden by mainstream. So it's not something that you can't find. It's because there are powers in this world that elites that actively try to, inhibit or like suppress this information from going out to the public.
Scientific instrument lies sprawled over the entire surface of the globe. At some period, perhaps it was over 4,000 years ago, almost every corner of the world was visited by a group of men who came with a particular task to accomplish. With the help of some remarkable power, by which they could cut and raise enormous blocks of stone, these men erected vast astronomical instruments, circles of erect pillars, pyramids, underground tunnels, cyclopean alignments, whose course from horizon to horizon was marked by stones, mounds, and earthwork. This calls to mind the theory we explored regarding the lost civilization of Atlantis, who may have in the remote past sent missionaries around the world. There's an incredible amount of research that's been done on ley lines. Putting this together with the geometric and architectural prowess of ancient sites indicates that whoever built these had advanced knowledge in many disciplines, including mathematics, engineering, surveying, and astronomy, on a level that really challenges the accepted narrative of prehistory. With respect to ley lines, the sheer number of them and the many sites they incorporate, which in some cases are spaced apart at equal intervals and even sometimes expressing complex mathematics like golden ratios and geodesic dimensions of the planet, renders coincidence virtually impossible for those who have really studied the subject in depth. Furthermore, these ley lines defy conventional explanations. For instance, they can't be explained by a common astronomical orientation. I've seen this point brought up by debunkers, so I wanted to address it. For example, if you have a group of passage graves aligned to an equinox, the sun's position on the horizon at that time is a fixed point that will create a line. But the sheer scale of some of these leys rules out that explanation. A good case study is the St. Michael's Line, which spans from the southwestern corner of the UK all the way across the country. Some claim that it may even extend into Russia. The UK section alone spans a distance of 350 miles. On average, the observed position of the sun at the horizon shifts after about 20 to 30 miles, so it really can't be explained this way. Even more impressive lines spanning the entire surface of the Earth have been proposed. These are referred to as Great Circles. Taking it all into account, there's enough evidence to convince the open-minded that there's definitely something to all this. It's really a whole field of research in and of itself, known as metrology, but it's not going to be what this episode is about. Of course, it's important to study this side of it, and I'm bringing it up because it helps to highlight just how much effort and thought was put into these sites and their alignments. It's the kind of thing that today people would only do for something they think is really important and worth doing, because they would get something out of it, and I suspect that ancient people were not all that different. So this begs the question, what was the intent and inspiration behind it? What did they achieve by doing this? There were certainly practical functions that aided in astronomy and navigation, perhaps even scientific explorations of geodesy, magnetism, and acoustics. These magnetic effects can also benefit agriculture. But there was also a deeper purpose, which anyone who visits these places today and walks the old straight tracks can sense. That these works were conducive to both science and spirituality is not a coincidence. As Manly Hall writes, quote, "Among the ancients, philosophy, science, and religion were never considered as separate units. Each was regarded as an integral part of the whole. The unfolding of man's spiritual nature is as much an exact science as astronomy, medicine, or jurisprudence." My focus for this
Manly P. Hall's fucking G, bro. Like, that dude's books like crazy, bro. He talks about a lot of ancient esoteric mythology. Like, he has crazy knowledge in lots of things. And he was a third-degree Freemason. It's not surprising.
Investigation is mainly on the metaphysical significance of what we'll call sacred pathways. What's interesting is that Watkins did gather enough evidence to show that many ley lines did coincide with footpaths, and yet they often seemed to take unnecessarily difficult routes. So how do we explain this? I want to now read a passage by John Michel from his book, A View Over Atlantis, where he waxes poetic on what he believed was a spiritual function of these ley lines, imagining what one would experience using them in a sort of mystical pilgrimage, an outward journey that evoked an internal journey of the soul. Echoes of this process, he claims, can be found in the stories of the Mabinogion, the characters of which move through their journeys as if part of a ritual in a dreamlike state. The passage reads, "The lines which crossed plains and valleys between the hilltops often appeared on the ground as leafy tunnels. Sometimes they ran through parkland, down avenues of trees. Sometimes they passed along rides and forest paths to a mound in a central clearing, or on raised causeways lined with twisted thorns stretching across a marsh. To travel along these lines was to pass secretly through the country by tree-lined passages, shaded from the sun by the branches meeting overhead. The endless soft flickering light deepened the dream within which the traveler moved. It was this state of spiritual tranquility that the architects of Gothic churches and cathedrals set out to recreate through their buildings. As late as the Middle Ages, those who understood the magic science of invoking the spirit of revelation and ecstasy set up the nave, passages, and cloisters of their great cathedrals to reproduce the harmonious proportions of a forest ride. The eye is drawn down the avenue between the pillars towards a veiled light far away at the east window. Overhead, the vaulted ribs of the roof, meeting at knots of carved foliage, spring up from the great stone trunks. Through the subtle broken patterns of stained glass windows, the light is diffused like that of a forest glade. Strange, twisted faces peer from among the leaves and flowers, carved on pillars and roof above the windows. These spirits of trees and plants, originally like every other carving within the cathedral, painted in their natural colors, must once have been instantly recognized as features with which every woodland traveler was familiar. The forest spirits, an inseparable part until recent centuries of the visible quality of every bush and tree, would in medieval times have given to all who entered a cathedral the sensation of walking through the dim, wavering light down an avenue through a great forest. The ancients profoundly entwined spirituality and the landscape, uniting its elements through a web of sacred pathways. 17th century antiquarian William Stuckley wrote that the Druids, quote, have made plains and hills, valleys, springs, and rivers contribute to form a temple of 3 miles in length. They have stamped a whole country with the impress of this sacred character. To be clear, most of the megalithic sites were built long before the Celtic migrations, but I still like this description he gives here. The Welsh historian Geoffrey of Monmouth, in his History of the Kings of Britain, written sometime around 1137 AD, tells us that the ancient legendary king Belenus called together all the men of the country to build great highways, one running straight across and 2 diagonally, meeting at the center of the island. These were sacred roads on which travelers were protected from arrest or attack. In Wales, sacred paths were presided over by Ellen, the goddess of dawn and dusk. Echoes of this former glory must have haunted King Arthur as he set out to re-establish the great lost kingdom of old. Now, most of these accounts I've mentioned here are considered pseudo-historical, but I think there is at least some element of truth behind them. Now is the time of night, that the graves all gaping wide, every one lets forth its sprite in the church pathways to glide. The living, it seems, were not the only travelers along these sacred paths. One of the most intriguing concepts which connects to this study is to be found in the somewhat obscure but ancient folklore regarding special and often invisible straight pathways along which spirits of the dead were thought to travel. These were known as ghost roads, corpse ways, or flight paths of the corpses, and some of these are known to overlap with lays and old physical roads. Although most of the records concerning these don't appear until the late medieval period, as author and researcher Paul Devereaux writes, quote, corpseways attracted spirit lore already extant in isolated rural populations, for they ran not only through the physical countryside, but also through the invisible country, the mental terrain of pre-industrial country folk. This belief can be found in many areas of the world. In Germany, it was believed that at certain times, these phantom pilgrims would use these ghost roads to journey from one graveyard to another, to evidently visit and hang out with their ghost friends. A 19th century German account reads, quote, these paths, with no exception,
Hang out with your ghost friends? Yeah, buddy. Like, this is the usual Sunday in antiquity. In ancient times, hanging out with ghost friends.
always run in a straight line, over mountains and valleys and through marshes. In towns, they pass the houses closely, or go right through them. The paths end or originate at a cemetery. It is a place where the spirits of the deceased thrive, and where one meets with them quite often. An interesting magical tradition likely associated with these ghost roads was a practice known as sitting up, or church watching, wherein the local village seer, wise person, or witch would hold a midnight vigil near the cemetery entrance used by spirits, known as the lich gate, or entrance of a church, and the practitioner, using a second sight ability, would watch for these spirits as they passed by, usually as part of a group procession. In so doing, he or she was able to ascertain which individuals were fated to die within the following year. These specters were sometimes called doubles, so it's a curious phenomenon where apparently the etheric body of a still living person was acting as if it were already dead, sort of subconsciously playing out its own destiny. Either that or it was some kind of glimpsing of the future. A common manifestation of this ghostly procession was the phantom funeral. In the summer of 1816, a Welsh farmer and his wife witnessed this strange event firsthand. The account reads, quote, "It was a beautiful evening, and the harvest moon was shining brightly. The field in which they worked had the parish road passing along one of its sides, without a hedge or ditch to separate it from the corn. When they had been busy for half an hour or more, they heard the hum of voices, as if a crowd of people were coming along the road. They paused in their work, and looking up in the direction of the sounds, they saw in the golden light of the moon a multitude of men and women coming into sight and advancing towards them. Being very intent upon their work, they again bent them to their task, without much thinking about what they had heard and seen. But the confused hum grew louder, and when the two binders looked up again, they beheld a large crowd approaching, gradually nearer. This time, they continued to gaze at the assemblage, and they beheld quite clearly a coffin on a bier carried on the shoulders of men. The binders heard the tramp of feet and the sound of voices, but not a syllable could they comprehend of what was being said. Not one face they could recognize.
Blimey, it's a ghost, innit?
They kept their eyes on the procession till it went out of sight. On the way leading towards the church, they saw no more of it, and an eerie feeling came over them. They went home, leaving the corn on the ground.
Let's go.
Right.
Further on, the same funeral was met by a tailor, at a point in the road where it was narrow and bounded by a fence on either side.
Excuse me.
The mourners filled the space from hedge to hedge, and when the tailor tried to force his way through, such was the pressure of the throng that he was obliged to get out of the way
Yo, the ad libs is so unnecessary. Like,
by crossing the hedge. He also failed to recognize any face, nor did he understand a word of the talk which he heard. It was not, however, a real funeral. It was 3 weeks after this spectral funeral that the real one came down the way from the upper end of the parish. The apparent merging of the past, present, and future seems to come up a lot within the context of sacred space. The divinatory practice of sitting up was conducted all over Britain, and vigils were held on supernaturally auspicious days: St. Mark's Eve, which was April 21st, Halloween, Christmas or New Year's, and Midsummer. While this documentation is not found until the 17th century, its similarity to shamanistic practices suggests much older origins. This belief in straight spirit travel influenced funerary rites across Europe. There were designated roads for funeral processions, known as burial paths or corpseways, and these date back to at least the Middle Ages. These seem to have been deliberately made in convoluted routes, which may have been a sort of apotropaic measure. Since evidently spirits could only travel in straight lines, this would prevent any restless revenants from being able to return to the village and haunt the living. One of the only exceptions to the windy death roads are those in the Netherlands, which are invariably straight, built specifically for the transportation of the dead. Medieval records show that these were maintained by law and subject to inspections to ensure that they were unobstructed and straight. Funeral processions could only be conducted on these roads. I had kind of an interesting idea here, so humor me for a minute. The Dutch have been consistently ranked as some of the happiest people in the world, so perhaps the spirits of their dead are more content to cross over, or are more amenable if they do stick around. There is
is
this
that true that spirits can only travel in straight lines?
kind of use of the straight line in order to connect with spirits in other cultures. Among the native tribes of North America, we find the practice of building connective ridges between ceremonial fire pits and sweat lodges, which were believed to give spirits access to them. Many of the more circuitous death roads have a more recent origin, which would coincide with the general shift away from the ancestral worship of antiquity. At any rate, this kind of spirit befuddlement, by interrupting the straight path, shows up pretty much everywhere. Baltic fishermen, on returning from the sea, would run around stone labyrinths on the shore to stop trolls from being able to follow them.
You couldn't catch me, and me never will.
Feng Shui practitioners would use sharp curves and obstacles, like the shadow wall, positioned in front of entrances to keep bad spirits from entering the home, as they believed that demons traveled in straight lines.
Yeah, every mythology has these kinds of, like, some kind of like a deity or some kind of like a emblem placed in front of the house, to ward off evil spirits. It's like common in every mythology.
Another protective measure was ritual sweeping or cleansing.
I don't understand the part, but can demons only travel in straight lines? That would be so stupid.
Of roads. This has been documented in both America and Europe. It was usually done with a kind of magical spirit flail, whereby unsavory spirits would essentially be shooed off of the path.
Get out of my way.
Similar to ghost roads are fairy paths, which were also mainly invisible, but could sometimes be identified by the presence of thorns. These ran straight between the ring forts, along which troops of fairies were thought to travel, notably on their way to battle with other tribes. They were also believed to make passages through the air. Folklorist Patrick Kennedy wrote that, quote, "It is known that the hill folk, in their nightly excursion and in the visits of one tribe to another, go in a straight line, gliding, as it were, within a short distance of the ground. And if they meet with any strange obstacle in their path, they bend their course above them or at one side, but always with much displeasure." The following is a summary of a statement given by one Mr. Hugh Sheridan, detailing his paranormal experience, which occurred in Ireland in 1953. "I was going home as usual, across the fields from where I worked to my home in Ballybogle. I was alone. It was duskish, about 6:30 p.m., and when nearing a corner of one of the fields, I heard a tittering noise, like the titter of someone going to play a joke on you. At first, I thought it was some of the other men who had gone on before me. However, I noticed immediately afterwards what looked like a large greenish tarpaulin on the ground with thousands of fairies on it. I started on the path towards home, and the fairies went with me, in front and all around. The larger fairies kept the nearest to me. The ones in front kept skipping backwards as they went, and their feet appeared to be touching the ground. They tried to get me off the path towards a gateway leading from the field. But just before I reached it, I realized they were trying to take me away, so I resisted and turned towards the path again.
No, I won't do it.
At about 40 yards from the gateway, I was going along by the ditch when I fell or got into it somehow. While I was in it, the fairies remained around, and I could see others coming out of the bushes and the briars. They were smiling and pleasant all the time, and I could see their eyes watching me. I got out of the ditch and continued towards the path until I reached it again. I moved on towards home with the fairies around me, and they kept up this tittering noise the whole time. In the end, I got to a plank, leading across a ditch from one field to another, and suddenly, all the fairies went away. They seemed to go back with the noise gradually fading. When I got home, I found I was about 3/4 of an hour late, but I thought I had only been delayed a few minutes. While the fairies were with me, I had a rather exciting feeling, like being on a great height, but I was in no way afraid, and I would very much like to meet them again. I think this account is a pretty good illustration of the fairies' proclivity towards their paths, maybe even implying that they were only able to manifest along them, since they disappeared once the man evidently crossed beyond this one's boundary. There are scores of fairy-like beings in the folklore across Europe, also believed to travel along special pathways. We know well that to build over them spelled disaster, but more dangers also arose should the unwary traveler run into them during their cavalcades.
What the fuck actually happened in medieval times and antiquity? Like, what the fuck actually happened? You see a lot of descriptions of, fairies, elves, and all these, you know, people with faces of dogs and animals. Like, what the fuck actually happened in medieval times? There's a lot of unexplained creatures in there, paintings and shit. Like, what was going on there? Like,
The mystery of these ancient supernatural trackways deepens the further back in time we go, as archaeological discoveries around the world reveal a universal human fixation on continuous lines in the landscape in connection to spiritual beliefs and ritual. All over the world, we find ancient megalithic structures that seem to have been deliberately placed in straight lines, many of which are associated with ritual paths. Infrared satellites revealed an extensive system of finely engineered ancient roads running all throughout Chaco Canyon in New Mexico. These are thought to have been built by the lost Anasazi tribe. Rather than being made for travel between settlements, they linked together what appeared to have been natural sacred sites, with the canyon as a whole serving as the main religious center. Votive offerings of pottery have also been found along their edges. The strange thing is, the ancestral Puebloans are not known to have had the wheel or the horse, so this massive effort was made for some ritual function. Across the pond in Avebury, Wiltshire, England, we find another striking example.
can we disprove the narrative? Can we get rid of the narrative that, like, they had, like, they don't know what the fuck a wheel was? They invented the wheel. They, uh, they discovered fire by taking two stones and rubbing against each other. Can we just get rid of that narrative? Like, it's so obvious that's not the case. Like, they discovered, bronze tools, iron tools, all this stupid shit we thought in, like, history. Like, it's obviously, like, super fake.
Of what appears to have been a ceremonial path. This Neolithic construction is 25 meters wide, bordered by two parallel lines of large standing stones, roughly 200 in count, forming a winding trackway through the countryside. Known as Kennet Avenue, it spans 2.5 kilometers in length, connecting the Stone Circle Henge monuments, Avebury, and the sanctuary. Rather than using the demarcated road for travel, archaeological investigation indicates that people actually traveled along the outside of the path. Like in the previous example, votive offerings have been found. Here they were placed at points where the course shifts its direction. Across the British Isles, we see hundreds of kersuses, raised earthen tracks which link together mound sites. At Stonehenge, there are two of these, stretching over a mile, connecting it with two long barrows to the north. Some understanding of the function and significance of these ritual roads has fortunately been preserved in indigenous cultures. In Colombia, the Kogi, descendants of the extinct Tairona culture, still tend the ruins of the ancient jungle cities of their ancestors, connected by stone causeways, also associated with invisible spirit paths, which their shamans would use during their out-of-body soul flights. The Siberian Chukchi people retain maps of lines marking the same type of spirit path. In shamanic practices around the world, these are often represented or constructed physically in ritual. As Devereaux writes, quote, "I have found that a strange ancient association between spirits and straight lines could also extend to threads and cords. An Australian Aboriginal healer would fix the filament produced by a certain insect to the head of a sick person and run it to a nearby bush where the patient's soul was ensnared. The spirit would then be coaxed down the insect's thread back into the person's body. Again, during a healing, Siberian Buryat shamans would lay an arrow next to a sick person and run a thread in a straight line out from the arrow point to a tree outside the tent, so that the patient's spirit could be brought back along the road formed by the thread. The Kalahari Kung climb threads when their souls go out of body during trance dancing, and the Rigo people of Papua New Guinea leave a taut fishing line behind them when they go on their out-of-body flights." Now, Devereaux uses this idea of the spirit path to explain the ley line phenomenon, basically arguing that this debunks the theory of them being energy currents. I have to disagree here with his conclusion. I think the two go hand in hand and actually complement one another. We know that shamanic abilities are enhanced by power centers, so to me it makes sense that if there were some kind of energy channels connecting them, that they could be used to
Yeah, that's 100% true.
facilitate the soul journey. That spirit travel is apparently confined to, or at least gravitates towards these paths, to me sort of implies a numinous quality inherent in the path itself. At the very least, I don't think it invalidates this idea. An important component of the sacred pathway mystery
Reason they disregard everything in antiquity as just like it's a spiritual and pseudoscience, nothing to do with actual mainstream science or truth itself, is because They don't want, you know, human beings to the elite. Someone has to become aware of like our spiritual nature, the essence itself. Like we made it God's essence. They don't want us to be aware of it. Like they're doing so. They don't want us to know the truth so bad that they have to distort mainstream science history itself. It's crazy.
lies in places where they cross or join with one another. Many ley lines appear to do so at especially important sites, such as the series of 8 alignments crossing at the Old Church in Woburn, Buckinghamshire, England. These intersecting lines, in some cases, even appear to form larger geometric networks, the likes of which Sir Montague Sharp outlined in his map showing ley lines forming a grid system over Middlesex County. Sometimes they overlap in even more complex ways. A good example of this can be seen in the famous Nazca lines of Peru. An archaeological team headed by Anthony Aveni pieced together the extent of this arrangement, along which many stone structures had been built. They revealed an intricate network of lines with over 60 intersectional points, where several lines converge to resemble the spokes of a wheel, with each wheel connecting to another. The team discovered that these pampa lines were well worn from walking in what was likely a ritualistic manner. Some of these were also connected to the Nazcan Ritual Center of Cahuachi, at which archaeologist Helene Silverman proposed, quote, the Nazca priest scientists observed the natural and supernatural world.
Yeah, they build all this thing. You wanted to believe they built all these kinds of things with fucking chisel and some donkeys and horses? Come on, bro. Like,
A fascinating way we can explore the significance of these sacred convergences is by looking at the plethora of folk beliefs regarding crossroads. Here we get a definite sense that these locations, often linked to ancient sacred sites and pathways, were seen as particularly numinous zones, evidently causing a localized thinning of the veil, or acting as some kind of portal. Anthropologist Walter Evan Wentz stated that, quote, the dead are fond of frequenting crossroads, and so are all sorts of fairies. The Romanian fairy called the Lele would wait at the crossroads and cast malefic spells on people and their animals as they passed through. In Celtic regions, the Corrigan was a dwarf, which at crossroads was believed to attack travelers who were running late to their destination. The Romans would leave offerings to the Lares, guardian spirits, at crossroads. In many magic traditions, spirits were also summoned at these locations. For instance, in Iceland, on New Year's Eve, a seer would lie at the crossroad as still as a corpse, cover himself in animal skins, and recite incantations to call in the spirits for questioning. Somewhat paradoxically, spirits were also bound at the crossroads, as these were interruptions of the straight path, having the same effect as things like stream crossings and bridges. In the fairy story from earlier, we saw this play out when the man crossed the plank and these entities suddenly stopped following him. The belief in this inhibiting effect was why suicides were buried at crossroads, and there also hangings were conducted, and on it goes. So by implication here, it seems the belief was that spirits were really confined in a metaphysical sense to the energetic current that the path represented. In other words, the path itself isn't really physically destroyed or blocked off. Rather, I kind of interpret this as the underlying energy is somehow being disrupted. For instance, in Native American practice, all one had to do was lay a small branch across the way to stop a spirit from following. The British similarly made spirit traps by making webs of thread across the road. In the case of something like a bridge, there's still technically a way over it, but the river or ditch underneath seems to somehow have disconnected the circuit, so to speak. The principle governing this spirit travel is still active today, as we see UFO reports and other paranormal phenomena falling into linear and grid-like patterns. Sightings of ghostly horsemen, stagecoaches, and cars speeding down old roads fill the annals of folklore, as well as modern records. Paranormal researcher Theo Brown, in documenting sightings of Britain's notorious hellhound, the spectral black dog with burning red eyes, found that locations of many of the sightings could be connected by straight lines on a map. And as a side note here, the type of phenomenon we
Hellhound sounds like the coolest name ever.
see today is by no means disconnected from the past. For instance, certain types of fairies were thought to take the shape of black dogs, as well as balls of light, what someone today might interpret as a UFO. So at this point, we certainly see a connection between pathways and supernatural phenomena, however ill-defined. But in piecing together this mystery, we need to find a more concrete conceptual framework for this idea of earth energy currents that we can sort of set as a solid foundation for sacred pathways. This is where the ancient Chinese philosophy of feng shui comes in, which holds that vital forces of terrestrial energy, earth qi, manifest as currents called lung mei, or dragon veins. They are the main arteries and vital sources out of which qi emanates and flows through the earth. Dragon veins make up the ridges and lines in the landscape, and its counterpart manifests in watercourses, rivers and streams, the blood of the dragon. Scholar Stephen Skinner writes, quote, the geometry of the flow of qi can be amazingly complex, forming a lattice or a network between the main dragon lines, for no part of the earth is completely dead. Some parts are barren and some are stagnant, but none are totally dead. Now, unfortunately, an error seems to have been made here in trying to connect dragon veins to the Western concept of spirit paths, a fallacy that I've seen repeated in many writings discussing ley lines, that dragon veins form straight lines. Based on my research, I can pretty confidently say that this is incorrect. The dragon is exclusively associated with curved lines and serpentine movement, forming the ups, downs, twists, and turns of the landscape. Since the dragon is, as scholar Evelyn Lipp writes, quote, the most significant factor, as it either makes or destroys the fortune of man, the symbol of beneficial forces of nature and the superior being, unquote, Chinese feng shui always seeks to replicate these non-linear flows. quote, ride the dragon, as it were, and so this principle is well evidenced in ancient Chinese architecture. Generally, tortuous lines are thought to promote the accumulation of good qi because it slows its movement, allowing it to be contained and preserved. Straight lines, on the other hand, cause qi to flow too rapidly, which disperses it, and also generates sha, or killing energy, which is, as Skinner writes, quote, essentially the poisonous opposite of qi. Generally speaking, all straight lines are evil indications, but most especially when straight lines point directly at a spot where a dragon's lair has been chosen. The dragon's lair is an auspicious site that serves as a kind of reservoir, receiving an inflow of qi. A straight line that intersects a highly charged vein or lair is all the more dangerous. These are referred to as secret arrows, symbolically piercing the body of the dragon. The straightness of Western lays could ostensibly be interpreted negatively from the feng shui perspective. So it seems we do have an incompatibility here. However, this is not always the case, as we do find sites that have curved features. For example, at Kennett Avenue, most archaeologists describe it as having a winding course, and it's pretty apparent when you look at it, even though one of these ley line researchers I came across tried to argue otherwise. It's a little strange to me because I don't really see a reason to try to make everything about straight lines. We can still accommodate nonlinear qualities in this study of Earth mysteries as a whole without undermining ley lines. All of these things can have their place, because there were probably many different arrangements that were used for different purposes. It seems to me that this would only expand our understanding and allow us to draw more parallels across cultures. It also makes for a more congenial integration with science, as for example, the measurable geomagnetic telluric currents are more undulating and sort of meander in different ways as they travel through the variations of the landscape and soil. Another claim I came across is that the Chinese believed spirits traveled along the dragon veins. If true, this would be very helpful in connecting spirit paths to energy channels, but unfortunately I was not able to confirm this. If anyone listening is knowledgeable in feng shui and can give me some clarification, please let me know. Nonetheless, there are other ways in which we can connect these ideas. Straight lines, which most often occur due to man-made structures, things like rows of trees, roads, and railways, are said to direct qi along their courses. So in this instance, the physical path assumes an adjunct role as an energy conduit, but it can also be the other way around.
When someone says chi, it's synonymously used with aether, or like Tao, or like prana, like across different mythologies, it's the same meaning. Like
Earth energy researcher David Cowan believes that many of these old roads were actually built over pre-existing geomagnetic currents. In fairy folklore, we do find that sometimes the fairy paths overlapped with routes used by people, especially older ones. Now, why would this be the case? Well, virtually all plants and animals, as well as humans, have the ability to actually sense geomagnetic energy, and will often modify their behaviors in ways that align with it. They also use it for navigation. There's no question that ancient humans had a keener magnetic sense than people do today.
it's so true. Like even animals are aware of like Earth's magnetic field. Like it's crazy. Like and these Leylines may be rightfully called dragon veins because dragons may also have some kind of capability to know some kind of magnetic field, and dragons 100% existed in antiquity. Like you could not make me believe that dragons didn't exist, bro. Like crazy the amount of evidences for existence of dragons out there.
If only because they spent more time living in the natural world. And still today, this attunement is preserved among Aborigines. Author Robert Lawler wrote about several instances in which he witnessed firsthand their uncanny wayfinding skills, most likely using this geomagnetic sense. They could basically wander anywhere into the outback blindfolded, in places they had never been before, and easily find their way back every time. It was basically impossible for them to get lost. So before many of these roads were built, I think it's definitely possible that they existed as footpaths, where people were essentially following magnetic flow lines. Animals do something similar. Geomancer Richard Feather Anderson points out that, quote, sheep and other cloven-hooved animals prefer to walk along these nature spirit paths. The larger of the, quote, spirit holes, or openings in fences, walls, and hedgerows, all over the British Isles left for the fairies' perambulations, are also used by sheep. This theory can be instantiated through more than just modern speculations. Evan Wentz, in documenting folk beliefs in rural Ireland among the older generations back in 1907, wrote, quote, an Irish mystic and seer of great power, with whom I have often discussed the fairy faith in its details, regards fairy paths as actual magnetic arteries, through which circulates the Earth's magnetism.
That's 100% like true. Like, and there have been whoever was running the civilizations during antiquity before the flood, and they 100% used these magnetic lines or ley lines, which are also like spiritual lines interchangeably used with some kind of harnessing, not just electricity, but also for navigating like ancient technology, like possibly like anti-gravity technology, like. There's so much conspiracy associated with Leylines and energy grid. It's crazy.
This may have been a kind of rare glimpse past the exoteric into the esoteric understanding that only certain wise people and seers were privy to. All things considered, this kind of leaves us with a chicken or the egg scenario as to which came first, the metaphysical or the physical path. Maybe it can go both ways depending on where we're looking. So combining this study of ley lines, sacred sites, feng shui, and modern scientific principles of geomagnetism, a theory was put forward that a kind of network of energy runs through the Earth. and that ancient peoples were on some level aware of its existence, marking and venerating its lines of force with sacred pathways and megalithic architecture, and that perhaps this was done to somehow interact with and harness this energy for its effects on the environment as well as human consciousness. We'll explore in the conclusion to the series how this might have worked. Of course, the intentions of the original builders can never be known for certain, but we can make some educated guesses by looking at the symbolic layout of these sites and extrapolate using well-documented systems like feng shui. Indeed, we find here the belief that energy or qi flowed throughout the whole of the landscape, and the feng shui practitioner sought to build in certain ways and at certain locations to harmonize with or alter its flow in order to maximize the potential benefits for human beings. Is it that far of a stretch, then, to suggest that people in the West were doing something similar? We can draw a pretty compelling parallel by noting that many ancient burial sites in the West were chosen because they were believed to be spiritually powerful locations. Feng shui is pertinent to this, as one of its original purposes was to develop a method of finding the best locations for tombs. They chose precise spots which were thought to have the most qi running through them, and constructed these tombs in a certain way which would stimulate its flow and gather the qi together, kind of like an energy dam. This is why the horseshoe shape was used in its layout, with the open end facing the source of the qi flow. We may have something reminiscent of this in the C-shaped ditches and standing stone patterns at megalithic sites in Europe. The Chinese believed that if the ancestral tombs were constructed in a way that provided an invigorating flow of good qi, whereby, in the words of 19th century missionary Ernst Eitel, the quote, spirit of the deceased, supposed to dwell there, is comfortable and free of disturbing elements, so that the soul has an unrestricted egress and ingress, the ancestor spirits will feel well disposed toward their descendants, will be enabled to constantly surround them, and willing to shower upon them all blessings within reach of the spirit world. Earth qi is believed to separate into two polarities, as all things in their philosophy do. The dragon, which embodies the yang masculine principle, manifests in the steep mountain slopes and craggy cliffs, while the tiger, the feminine principle, is embodied in gentle hills, lakes, and lowlands. The landscape is the outward expression of these underlying energies, clothing or concealing them. Finding areas where the two polarities were in balance, or else creating that balance, is one of the most important tasks of the feng shui practitioner. Skinner writes, quote, the greatest generation of qi occurs at a point where the lines of the dragon and the tiger are locked together in intercourse. Going back to the MIKEY line in England, it appears that it may feature just such a union of opposites. Dowsers have allegedly found two lines of energy that wind back and forth through the ley, creating a double helix structure. Author Danny Sullivan writes, undulating across the countryside in pairs, one polarity tends to hug the higher ranges and hilltops, while the other seeks out valleys, plains, and water. The combined energies of their sporadic meetings create spiritually uplifting backwaters of balanced purity which have a profound effect on the biomagnetic fields of our bodies. We might wonder then if both in the East and the West there was some similar understanding of Earth energies, if only at the level of intuition. Or we could go even further, as Michelle suggested, that at one time in the remote past there was a universal tradition around the world due to a cultural transmission. But I'm certainly not married to this idea. I think we should definitely consider the possibility that similar practices arose independently, especially when we acknowledge this geomagnetic sense which is innate to all human beings. So it could have essentially dictated these alignments and pathways that already existed in an energetic sense. This may be hinted at in ideas about dragons and serpents, which permeate myth around the world and are usually associated with creative energy. There's the rainbow serpent of the Aborigines, the dragon of feng shui, as well as the Western version of this creature, said to lurk among the stones of Britain. Saint Michael, whose namesake claimed the ley containing this serpentine energy, was known as the Dragon Slayer. The winding form of the serpent may represent the magnetic currents of the earth, which have actually been shown scientifically to enhance life and fertility. In the conclusion to this series, we'll explore the science of geomagnetism and its effects on the human mind as possibly being a formative influence on this universal belief. So all of this leads us to wonder how these sites...
The science of geomagnetism and geomancy in general need to be explored more, and I don't know why there's not like a concentrated effort on, on this part of like scientific research itself.
functioned.
Well, I know why, but I'm just saying for the audience, say there's something fishy going on in the mainstream narrative.
If certain conditions or actions could somehow cause them to activate. The Hopi claimed to use their sacred pathways to communicate telepathically. Anthropologist Charles Mountford documented the Australian Aboriginal practice in which each village, in succession, would travel along the songlines to the sacred centers to perform their local piece of their creation story through song. He writes that the belief attached to this was that, quote, every food, plant, and animal has an increased center where a performance of the proper rituals will release the life essence and thereby bring about its increase. These rituals evidently are necessary for their survival and have some real effect, as Michelle writes that, quote, where they are allowed to lapse, the Aborigines lose their ability to sustain life in the bitter deserts of their native land. Invoking the ancient visions of Earth as a living body, the indigenous geomantic traditions seem to treat this network as something like not only the veins providing the vital fluid, but also the nervous system of the Earth, as we see a kind of exchanging of information. Like that of the human body, perhaps it's somehow collecting information about itself and the environment through some form of senses, interpreting that information and sending the proper commands to various parts of the system in order to maintain homeostasis. Perhaps this is how the ancients could allegedly prophesize or cause certain environmental changes, by somehow intercepting or altering its flow. even adding new information by directed intention through ritual. At different points in the energy network, there are different psychic centers, and in each path there is a unique process and transference occurring. Maybe this is why every lay has its own unique name and character, its own kind of feel to it, that those who visit it pick up on. By walking certain pathways through a kind of sympathetic resonance, perhaps humans can stimulate certain internal processes within themselves. For instance, when you climb from a low valley to a mountaintop, you externalize the process of the spiritual ascent from a low to a high frequency, which may stimulate that same movement or process within your own energy system. All this is complete wild speculation, of course, but it's interesting to think about. Geomancers continue to try to shed light on how this system might work through various forms of divination. There's also been more scientific studies done showing that a lot of these megalithic sites are located near geomagnetic anomalies, which can actually be recorded empirically with magnetic meters. Dowsers have repeatedly marked alleged energy pathways along ley lines, as well as these strange vortexes of energy that seem to spiral out from standing stones at central locations. This pattern is also mentioned in feng shui. The Neo-Confucian philosopher Zhou Xi, as scholar Ol Brun writes, quote, gave qi a rotating centrifugal force, forming both a stable sediment in the shape of a central earth, as well as a purer, constantly moving part forming heaven. David Cowan describes one incident in which he experimented with a standing stone near Crieff in Scotland by attaching a crystal to it. Seems a little gimmicky, but he speculated that this had some kind of amplifying effect. As soon after this, a family actually informed him that as they were walking a long straight path near the site, quote, they were astonished to see a little woman coming towards them, clad in green, with black spots on her face, apparently walking on air, as part of her legs and feet were missing. Floating up to the terrified party, she raised her long, dirty fingers with black fingernails and said, "Dee," and vanished into thin air. In dowsing the
The ad-libs were so necessary, like, I don't know why he included
stones
that.
at Connaughton Farm, Cowan
This
claims
dude.
that there are energy lines passing between the stones, which direct it to create a sort of dumbbell-shaped circuit, and that when one of these lines encountered a stone, it was, quote, warped to a different area. I should note here that dowsing isn't a tool that can be used to gather empirical evidence, as it doesn't operate by any known physical means. It's essentially a divination tool, although some have speculated that electromagnetic fluctuations could cause micro-movements in the practitioner's hands, causing the rods to pivot. Nonetheless, it's a fascinating tradition with ancient roots, and if you look at its historical use, it actually has a solid reputation for being able to accurately locate water, minerals, really anything hidden underground. Investigators love to try to put together a model for how this energy system might be laid out on a global scale. Many possible configurations have been suggested, inspired by ideas like sacred geometry and the Platonic solids. These are symmetrical, three-dimensional objects, where each side consists of the same size and shape polygon. So there are 5 of these, increasing in complexity as more sides are added. The last 2, the dodecahedron and icosahedron, are of particular interest because they approximate the sphere most closely. Plato himself stated that the Earth, when viewed from above, resembles a ball made of 12 strips of leather. This is the same number as the dodecahedron. In the Timaeus dialogue, he also states that the demiurge fashioned the world using a 12-sided form. Plato considered these shapes to be the most perfect forms, each corresponding to one of the 5 elements, serving
Yeah, dodecahedron corresponds to Aether itself, 12 sides.
as the building blocks of creation. Similarly, the lines of these shapes, when overlaid onto the Earth, are conceived as the main energy channels, out of which smaller systems then sort of branch out like veins from the main arteries in the human body or the tributaries of a river. Biologist Ivan T. Sanderson, in plotting cases of disappearing ships, planes, strange mechanical malfunctions, and magnetic anomalies, proposed that there were 12 triangle-shaped areas, which he called vile vortices, or devil's graveyards, and these appeared to be spaced evenly across the world. He found that by using an icosahedron grid as a template, each of these vertexes actually matched up precisely with these paranormal hotspots. One of these is the notorious Bermuda Triangle, and a couple other similar
Yeah, I don't know about this, bro. This seems like pseudoscience at this point.
areas, but there's also many that feature megalithic sites and ruins of notable ancient cities, such as Mohenjo-Daro, the Algerian megaliths, the stone ruins of Great Zimbabwe, and Easter Island. Others are geologically significant locations with increased tectonic activity, like the New Hebrides Oceanic Trench and the Kamaihu underwater volcano of Hawaii. The north and south poles of the Earth also lie at 2 of these vertexes. Many different grid systems have been proposed by geomancers and those studying metrology, and there are usually thought to be more than one at play, depending on factors like the type of energy, the specific area, and the scale. An interesting example of this is the Hartmann grid, forming 5x5 squares extending 3-dimensionally over the Earth's surface and above it. Its lines are believed to alternate between positive and negative charges. Points where lines intersect cause amplified energy. Where 2 positive lines meet, good energy is generated, while a double negative creates bad energy. And a positive-negative crossing has a harmonizing or neutralizing effect. Human and geological activity is thought to distort, shrink, or expand the grid in certain areas, so there can be many variations of the scale depending on the location. And finally, we can't forget astrological influences, which are probably the most important of all of them, but that's a whole other can of worms, so I'm definitely saving that for another time. For now, I'll just say that in feng shui, heaven qi is thought to influence and can overrule earth qi. At certain times, different heavenly energies were thought to pass into the earth, and this may be one reason why we see so many sites aligned to certain astronomical events. So we can talk all day about grid theories, but when we actually observe nature unfolding as it does in its fluid and dynamic ways, we, of course, at least on the surface, don't see perfect geometric patterns of straight lines, although there are some forms reminiscent of platonic solids at the molecular and cellular levels. Zooming out to the real world, as we experience it directly, the feng shui model begins to make more sense. As qi follows different paths with different currents of wind and water, hence the term feng shui meaning wind and water, the resulting networks are not always neat and symmetrical. So again, we run into this conflict with the Western Euclidean sensibility. Maybe
All these grid pattern models that, you know, today people try to, construct doesn't make sense because the mainstream or the current society has a wrong understanding what Earth actually is. That's why they cannot formulate a structure or like place energy grid on the Earth itself. Like you guys don't even know what actually the Earth is. Like it's not what they tell you. Like a lot of things we can't say. It's not what they tell you.
these are just two different perspectives or aspects of the whole system. I do kind of see how both could be applicable and not necessarily contradict each other. For example, when you look at something like cymatic patterns that have geometric symmetry but also incorporate curved lines, it's possible to find common ground. Cymatics refers to a phenomenon that occurs when sound vibrations are applied to glass or metal plates covered with a layer of fine particles like sand, and these vibrations actually cause them to arrange into certain geometric patterns, which can change dramatically depending on the frequency. This can also be done on the surface of water. The principle of cymatics is often used in this field of research as a way to sort of theorize how these Earth energies might propagate through the Earth. And there's some interesting work being done on its possible applications to other forms of energy, like electromagnetism, and how theoretically it's not limited to scale. However we want to imagine this energy network, and whether or not it actually exists, we really can't deny the symbolic resonance of sacred pathways within human consciousness. Musing on the symbolic meaning of the Native American medicine wheel, Evan T. Pritchard writes, quote, "What is sacred is not just transcendence. What is sacred is not just the world of things. It is the relationship between the two. Sacredness makes every step of the journey, both into and out of the world, meaningful. Transcendence, withdrawing from the body and returning to the source, that is one direction of the wheel. What is sacred is the whole wheel, creating, maintaining, and withdrawing from the world. All the directions are sacred, but only because of each other. Place one over the other, leave out one direction, and the sacredness is lost. It's the mystique, the wholeness that's holy, and the relatedness of all things that is everything." Sacred pathways are a reflection of a deep conviction, which has always been with us, that everything is connected, each part affecting every other, so that all fates are intertwined, woven together, like the threads of the moirai. We call our journey through life our path, as if to say the way is already laid out. We merely find it and align with it, like the ancient standing stones, and before one step has even been taken, something has already changed. The convictions of our ancestors live on within our collective unconscious, and these connections too form paths across time, strands of the great web. We notice that at certain points, our life paths seem to intersect and align with others in ways that produce effects greater than the sum of its parts, a spiritual harmony, like the songs of the Aborigines. In these synchronicities, we catch a glimpse of a staggering complexity, the sense of a greater order that remains shrouded from sight, but that if we walk into any part of this mystery
100%. This is about put out resource video. Like
with pureness of
follow
heart, the
hidden
path seems to
passwords
always
way.
reveal itself, our part, which contains the same essence of the whole, for the fruit of the light consists in every form of kindly goodness, righteousness of heart, and trueness of life. While our paths may seem full of twists and setbacks, when we look back at the end of it all, we realize that the hidden true path was always straight, that each turn was merely a step along the straight line of what we were to what we've become, each incongruity an allotment of the fates. We like to say that the journey is more important than the destination, recognizing subconsciously that the path is sacred, a symbol for the ineffable cosmic agent of transformation, sparking momentum, continuity of being, and connection to something greater. On some level, we recognize that life has not truly begun, and that we wander in a labyrinth of darkness until we have found it. We don't always need to know where it will lead, just that we are on it, because now we can trust that we are being led. We can feel when we're there, and we can see the signs. We've merely been distracted. In the age of access from anywhere and fast travel, the art of the pilgrimage is lost. Sometimes our connection to this invisible path needs to be strengthened by physically walking a path. It's the power of ritual, no less relevant today. This is why when we're stressed and confused, we suddenly get the urge to walk, and this clears our heads, allowing us to find our direction again. There's something to be said about a physical journey.
Yeah, there's something about the phrase touch the grass. Like there's something actually going outside and it clears your brain fog itself. Maybe it has to do with, uh, some kind of ethereal energy or some kind of like energy around the world itself. Like some kind of energy present around the air itself, some kind of electromagnetic energy that clears the brain fog in our head. Like when people say touch grass, they're actually trying to say that, you know, our brain regulates her itself or like get rid of the brain fog. due to some kind of like a ancient electromagnetic energy outside present in the nature. That makes sense.
Us of the more subtle one, that we're here, in this wide world, to do just that. By opening ourselves up to it, our insecurities shrink away into the vastness of the land, and in finding the great pathway that leads between and to all things, we find ourselves.
Yeah, so that's about it. So see you guys, what's your thoughts upon ley lines, and do you think are this conspiracy mainstream pseudoscience, or do you think these kinds of structures or like patterns, the energy grid is the energy grid of Earth itself, and actually we're used to draw some kind of free energy from thin air, from the ether itself. So that's about it. We'll see you guys another time with another video. Like, we'll be back coming fast, bro. Like, straight up.